You're watching CBS News 24/7. I'm Reed Cowan. All right, so President-elect Donald Trump giving us a preview of the first 2 weeks of his presidency during a wide-ranging news conference in Mar-a-Lago. He also responded to the breaking news of a D.C. judge blocking release of a major report from special counsel Jack Smith. Listen.
That's a big story. Yeah. So, if I get it right, the fake witch hunt started by the DOJ having to do with books and records, and Biden had many more, and he wasn't protected by the Presidential Records Act. I was. But all of that fake stuff that took the lives of people, I mean, literally destroyed people. People are destroyed because of what they did. Destroyed. But we got to be president. But Biden did it for 40 years. He did it when he was a senator. That was illegal. And they ruled it was illegal. How about that? They said, it's illegal, but he's unfit to stand trial. So he can stand and be president of the United States, but the prosecutor found that he's unfit for trial. I was going to use that as a major talking point, but I never got to use it because all of a sudden I had a new candidate who was also sort of unfit to stand trial, right? But so what you're saying is that the judge just blocked the so Cannon was thrown off the case. They dropped their appeal because he had no case. They dropped all of that, the lawsuits against us. They lost the lawsuit. So this is deranged Jack Smith. So he dropped the lawsuits. He was told to by the DOJ because they had no lawsuit. They lost in court in front of a very strong and a very brilliant judge. They lost in court, and that pertained to other cases in other courts. So he wanted to do a report just before I take office, probably. So he'll do like a 500-page report, and it'll be a fake report just like the investigation was a fake investigation. And I said, well, wait a minute. This guy was thrown off in disgrace. In disgrace. He's going back to The Hague or wherever they're going to send him. In disgrace. Because he failed so badly. Because it was a fake case against a political opponent. They thought they were going to use this to beat me. So what you're saying is, I'm just hearing that they're not allowed to issue the report. So if they're not allowed to issue the report, that's the way it should be. Because he was thrown off the case in disgrace. Why should he be allowed to write a fake report? It'll only be a fake report. That's great news. Yeah. Good.
And if I can just follow up real quickly, you want to comment, many Americans are angry that we're sending millions of dollars every month to the Taliban. Do you anticipate?
It's not even believable. Billions of dollars, not millions, billions. We pay billions of dollars to essentially the Taliban.
So let's go live to West Palm Beach, Florida, and CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro. Aaron, when we say this was a wide-ranging news conference, it was wide-ranging. In fact, if you took notes the old-fashioned way with a pen, you'd have sore knuckles. So let's get right now to talk about what was the first headline that that pertains to the soundbite that we just ran from the president-elect, and that is that judge blocking that report from Jack Smith's investigation. It sounds like this was news to the president-elect in real time during that news conference.
Yeah, the judge's decision happened right before Trump started his press conference. It's important to note this is a temporary block, as Trump's lawyers do have a separate appeal going in circuit court. So Judge Cannon says this will be blocked until they make a decision on this case. Obviously, Trump and his lawyers, his co-defendants, have been looking to block any special report coming from Jack Smith. And as you saw in his answer right there, he's pleased with Cannon's decision. For now, it's a fluid situation. We'll see how it develops throughout the day and week.
All right, and another headline that came out pertained to the hostages that were taken on October 7th. The president-elect saying that if those hostages are not released before he's inaugurated, quote, all hell will break loose in the Middle East. What does he mean? How was he able to drill down on what that means, or did he articulate or elaborate?
He kept it pretty broad. He did not articulate, but we know that Trump is a supporter of Israel. He has said that he wants them to, quote, get this done in regards to their war with Hamas and their strikes on Gaza. So he did not articulate what all hell breaks loose would mean, but just looking at what Trump has said in the past regarding the Middle East, potentially supporting Israel with more arms. But again, he kept it pretty broad during the press conference.
All right, he was also asked about Canada. He was asked about the Panama Canal. He was asked about the Gulf of Mexico. Had a lot to say about that, but also Greenland. We know that Donald Trump Jr. made a trip there. Any discovery out of this news conference that gives us an idea of why Donald Trump Jr. is in Greenland and what's in it?
From what we know, Donald Trump Jr. is there to film content for a podcast. We know that Charlie Kirk is there. James Blair, a close advisor to the president-elect as well, potentially spotted there. But Trump says that acquiring Greenland in some capacity could help them when it comes to military strategy. There have been long concerns about China's growing influence that they're trying to garner in the Arctic, and that seems to be during this press conference what Trump really harped on. But it's important to note that leaders in Greenland say it is not for sale, as they are calling for their own independence from Denmark.
It was also striking to me that the president-elect was critical of the man who the nation today is paying tribute to, and that is former President Jimmy Carter. His body right now is on its way inside a special military plane to lie in state in Washington, D.C. The president-elect speaking about former President Jimmy Carter, saying that his legacy is tarnished essentially because of the hostage deal and because of the Panama Canal. In the days ahead, will the president-elect attend services in Washington, D.C. for the late President Jimmy Carter, given what he had to say there today that was critical of him?
He is expected to be in Washington, D.C. on Thursday for former President Jimmy Carter's funeral. He will also be in D.C. the day before to meet with senators, but definitely a striking moment as Trump was criticizing Carter's decision on the Panama Canal. He, again, walked it back a little bit, saying that he thought Carter was a great man, but definitely critical of his handling of the Panama Canal there, as he believes it was an economic disaster what the U.S. did.
Aaron Navarro, thank you so much. Always great talking to you from West Palm Beach today. Have a great day. So we continue following those final tributes to former President Jimmy Carter as his body heads to Washington to lie in state. Carter began today's journey in his home state of Georgia. No doubt scenes like these fresh on the minds of people, from his beginnings to his service to his upbringing there in Georgia and then his swearing in on his inauguration day. We can tell you his casket left the Carter Center this morning before the ceremonial troops honored his departure at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Georgia. We wanted to bring you some of the more touching moments of today's page in American history. Watch. Ruffles and flourishes, 21-gun salute, hail to the chief, and then on the first note of that Christian hymn, Nearer My God to Thee, former President Jimmy Carter loaded onto that plane, that United States plane, along with his family members, headed to Washington, D.C., where he will lie in state. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us from the Navy Memorial in Washington. Ed, there's a reason the motorcade will stop there once the plane lands. Talk us through that.
That's right, Reed. Good to be with you from here along Pennsylvania Avenue. This is a memorial that was established for the U.S. Navy by then President Carter back in 1980. And, of course, he is a U.S. Navy, or was a U.S. Navy veteran. And so the military, who, of course, is conducting all of these ceremonies in Georgia and here in Washington today through Thursday, agreed with the Carter family to include this along the Pennsylvania Avenue route to the U.S. Capitol. So they will stop here at what is called Navy Memorial, and you can see the various flags. And what they will do here is switch his body out of the hearse that it will be carried into this point, and then to a caisson that'll be drawn by a riderless horse. This is the traditional tribute that the military gives to commanders-in-chief, should they choose to take it, and other senior officers of the military, Medal of Honor winners, prisoners of war. The Carter family will then walk the rest of the route from here up to the U.S. Capitol, doing something in reverse that President Carter was the first to do. He got out at exactly this spot back in 1977 and walked the rest of the parade route back to the White House. More recent history, younger Americans sort of know that as commonplace to see the president, the newly elected and newly inaugurated president, walk at least part of this Washington route. But Carter was the first to do it, in part because, remember, when he was elected, he was trying to eschew a lot of the trappings of the job and make the president a little less ceremonial and a little more human. So it was a big deal when he did it then, and they will essentially do the walk in reverse, taking him back to the Capitol, where he will begin to lie in state later today after a ceremony that will be led by Vice President Harris and congressional leadership. I got to say, though, Reed, between the snow that continues to blanket the Washington region and the incredible, quite robust security operations that are in place for this, I'll be surprised if there is a considerable number of people lining Pennsylvania Avenue for this, other than the members of the military who will stand watch as part of this military procession. It is bitterly cold. This is a snow day, not only for schools, but for most of the federal government that's based down here downtown. And so if it were better weather, perhaps people would come out in the afternoon from their offices. But that plus, again, the incredible security that's in place, not only because of the impending inauguration, but also because of the incidents that occurred most recently in New Orleans and Las Vegas. They've added security operations to this route, concerned especially, for example, about the possibility of vehicle attacks. So you've seen a lot of dump trucks and other large vehicles at intersections buoying what was already in place for security checkpoints and other things about a block south of the route, a block north. So this is expected to occur 90 minutes behind schedule as well because of the weather. Last night they decided they had to push back everything today to allow Washington to do what you're seeing right now, to literally clean the streets and make it so that the Carter family and the military procession can walk up an otherwise unobstructed Pennsylvania Avenue. Reed?
Well, and you and I may find a moment of irony here in that the working man or the working woman, whoever is behind that truck that's there to push the snow, may be somehow separated from the legacy of the presidency of the United States. But Jimmy Carter showed us that the people who power those trucks and do that work, they matter. And he likely would have been the first one to shake their hand and say thank you. Ed O'Keefe, we appreciate your report. We are awaiting that plane to land, and as soon as we see that, we'll have continuing coverage. Ed O'Keefe reporting live. Thank you so much. So let's recap the next 2 days of memorials and tributes. The former president will lie in state at the Capitol for the next 2 days. The state funeral services begin Thursday at the Washington National Cathedral. His body will then return to Plains, Georgia for a private funeral ceremony before the family holds a private interment. And CBS News has crews all over the country, as we just demonstrated for you. You heard from Skylar Henry there in Georgia, Ed O'Keefe there in our nation's capital. All of them positioned to cover and honor the legacy of the former president as our nation remembers. By the way, at 2 p.m. Eastern, a special report once Carter arrives in Washington to begin those state funeral services and all of that tradition. Well, a disturbing and a developing story out of Florida. 2 stowaways found dead in a plane's landing gear. When we come back, we are in Fort Lauderdale with one of our correspondents, bringing us the very latest from our monitors that we continue to watch while we go to break. Breaking news. Stay with us. Hundreds of millions of Americans feeling the icy grip of winter in the eastern 2/3 of the country. You can see it right there. Ice and snow blanketing major roads across various Midwest and Mid-Atlantic states. And we do have a tragic angle to this story. 5 people have lost their lives out there on the roads. 2 of those deaths happened in Missouri. 3 of them happened in Kansas. The weather also caused widespread power outages. In fact, more than 170,000 people in the dark. Customers across Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia still without power. And in many cases, that means in this cold, they are without heat. Air travel facing disruptions as well. More than 2,400 flights delayed around the United States. More than 500 flights canceled. A powerful 7.1 quake responsible for more than 120 deaths of people in rural Tibet. Video to our monitor shows us this. Listen to that. The shaking can be heard right there on that security camera. This is the situation in the northern foothills of the Himalayas. So now, Tibet fire rescue personnel are racing against time to search for any survivors. They are literally, in some cases, digging by hand in the rubble that you see right there, moving that debris to try to get people out alive. We're going to continue watching this story closely. You know, that shaking entered about 50 miles north of Mount Everest, but even people in Nepal's capital and parts of northern India, they said it was big enough. They also felt the tremors. Laura Bicker with our partners at the BBC News reports on this rescue effort. She's positioned in Beijing watching all of it.
Obviously, we are several hours on from this earthquake now. It happened at 9 in the morning in that, as you say, remote mountainous area. And now we are beginning to see the impact of that 7.1 magnitude quake. We are seeing on CCTV, which is the Chinese state broadcaster, many people being taken from underneath the rubble. Now, it does seem that rescuers have managed to reach the area despite its distance from any major city. They have managed to reach some of the worst hit areas, and the reason they've managed to do that is because the Chinese Air Force launched a drone, an unmanned drone, which it flew right over the Mount Everest National Park area to try to find the cities, to try to find the villages that have been most affected. Now, you can see my backdrop. I'm here in Beijing. You can see those tall buildings. That is not the case in those mountainous regions. These houses are low-lying. They're made of bricks, and you've seen them. Certainly, we've seen footage coming in. They've just collapsed, and they've fallen on people, and rescuers are combing through the rubble trying to find survivors. We've also seen many people, elderly, children, out on the street being treated by both the army, by the police, and by rescuers themselves. Now, hundreds of people, hundreds of rescuers have been dispatched. President Xi Jinping announced this morning that he issued instructions to ensure that civilian casualties are at a minimum, and that those who have lost their homes can be at least housed somewhere warm and somewhere dry for the time being. That is going to be a challenge, because just as getting rescuers in there is going to be very difficult, it's going to be really difficult to get any aid trucks into these mountainous regions.
Our partners with the BBC, we thank you for that picture. Now let's come home. Our monitors take us to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where workers doing routine maintenance at an airplane there on the tarmac made a tragic discovery. Authorities confirmed for CBS News 24/7 in the last hour, 2 men were found dead inside the wheel well of this JetBlue plane. So that commercial jet took off from JFK International Airport last night, landed without any problem. The airline and local authorities are now trying to figure out how the 2 men bypassed security, how they managed to make it inside that compartment in the first place, to say nothing of wanting to know how they died. According to the TSA, that plane began its stay in Kingston, Jamaica. It then flew to JFK in New York, then to Salt Lake City, Utah, then back to JFK before ending up in Fort Lauderdale. We still do not know who those 2 dead men are or were, but transportation experts say people who stow away in wheel wells almost always face death, since they are not typically pressurized or heated. So that plane took off in some pretty frigid temperatures and reached a cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. Another death when something very similar happened on Christmas Eve. A body found inside a wheel well of a United plane that took off from Chicago and landed in Hawaii. That incident still being investigated, but now we are starting to see a trend. So CBS News 24/7 will continue watching this as the investigators look at what happened in both cases now. The man accused of burning a sleeping woman to death on a New York City subway train tells a judge he is not guilty. Prosecutors say 33-year-old Sebastian Zapeta lit the woman on fire and then fanned the flames with a shirt before then sitting on a bench to watch her burn. They go on to say that Zepeda told police he was the man in the surveillance video of the fire, but he also told them he drinks a lot, alcohol consumption, can't remember what happened. He's facing multiple counts of murder as well as a charge of arson. International news now. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of France's far-right National Front Party, has died at the age of 96. He was known for fiery rhetoric against immigration and multiculturalism. Le Pen was a member of the European Parliament until the age of 90. President Joe Biden declaring 2 new national monuments in California today, the Chuckwalla National Monument in the southern part of the state and the Satitla National Monument in the north. Both areas are sacred to native tribes. The designation protects the areas from fossil fuel drilling and mining. President Biden will deliver remarks this afternoon. Let's look live at the Santa Monica Pier in California. You can see Old Glory whipping there, and our camera also moving as we look at that Ferris wheel. That is because of the force of Santa Ana winds. It's dry in California, and when the winds kick up in California, you know we are at a huge risk of fire for many parts of Southern California. Jess is here to talk to us about the wind.
Fire weather conditions continue to be a big concern as we continue to see the same trend into these winter months. And we head all the way over into California, where high wind advisories and warnings are in effect right now, as well as red flag warnings. It looks like a mess right now. These are all advisories issued by the National Weather Service right now. And as we take a closer look at areas like Los Angeles, it's the same exact spots dealing with the Santa Ana winds that are causing a big concern for us right now when it comes to critical fire weather conditions. This is our fire weather outlook as we head into the afternoon hours today. Critical and extreme risks in certain communities, stretching from Temecula all the way up into Santa Clarita. Some of the strongest winds expected today just in this region alone as we head a little bit more north, closer to the same burn scars that we experienced fires in just later last year. Earlier this year. Now here's what's happening for us as we head into the afternoon hours today. Wind speeds pushing offshore anywhere up to around 40 to 50 miles per hour. That's the biggest concern in those higher elevations where we're also dealing with really low relative humidity right now. Winds, low relative humidity, and these warm temperatures too. These are all big ingredients when it comes to fire weather conditions down there. From Chatsworth over into Thousand Oaks, we could expect 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts just by lunchtime today. Now that stays strong into the afternoon hours today too, just throughout this region. And watch how heading into this afternoon, we drop a lot in that relative humidity, closer to around 10% just up into areas like Chatsworth. So there's lots to talk about with this, but of course the number one concern right now when we're issuing red flag warning conditions in winter months has to do with any sort of small spark that could become the biggest catastrophe in these communities.
And the people who live there, pay homeowners insurance, are very much aware of that. Jess, thank you so much.
Completely.
When we come back, our money correspondent Kelly O'Grady updates you on major changes at Facebook. I'll have a conversation with her about how Dana White is now going to be on the board of Meta. We're watching it when we come back. All right, get this. No more fact-checking like you're used to on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. CEO Mark Zuckerberg of Meta says that they will replace third-party fact-checkers with something they call a community notes model, kind of similar to the one used by Elon Musk on his platform X. Zuckerberg calling this move a return to free expression. So let's go live to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Okay, Kelly, what can you tell us about all of this? This is a change.
It's a big change, Reed. I mean, this program was put into place back in 2016, so they're getting rid of third-party fact checkers. No one's getting laid off here. Content moderation is not going away entirely, but this was, sort of the group of third-party folks. They're moving away from that, and they're really putting the onus now on the users to identify what content needs more context, what content is more nuanced, needs another point of view. I will note they are, as I said, said not getting rid of content moderation. They're going to be really focused on removing illegal content, pornographic content, things like that, that there's always that concern around safety. But they are moving more towards that community notes piece that you see on X. And I just want to highlight two quotes for you from the press release. I'll read them out to you. Meta said, quote, "We've seen this approach work on X, where they empower their community to decide when posts are potentially misleading and need more context." And then another quote for you, Reed, where Meta said, quote, "Just like they do on X, community notes will require agreement between people with a range of perspectives to help prevent biased ratings." And, in the announcement, Zuckerberg came out and said, hey, this has been too biased for too long. And I think it was very interesting that they highlighted the fact that X is doing this in their post. I mean, that's a competitor for them. But Reed, you sort of zoom out more broadly. This is a change that Meta is making. It's going to be a big one. But we have seen a lot of tech companies start to make changes with the new administration coming in. So certainly likely not to be the last.
Interesting. I just can't take my eyes off Mark Zuckerberg's profile picture with all of the chains. Maybe he's going to go into rap next. Another headline from Meta, speaking of how pop culture is starting to influence the company, Zuckerberg just tapped USC President Dana White to join Meta's board. We know White's a longtime supporter of President-elect Donald Trump. What can you tell us about this choice for a board position?
So a couple things here. First, this is a pretty standard thing. Every couple of years, a public company, their board of directors, they change out members. So members will leave and new members will come in. So Dana White is joining the board along with two other people replacing those whose terms are up. Very standard when it comes to a public company. There's two things that are interesting here. Diverse perspectives. That's what you want on your board. Some of the other folks that are on the board, there's someone who's involved with DoorDash, with McKinsey, very broad range of perspectives when you are advising a company like Meta. When I used to work at Disney, we had folks all over the place coming to advise on the board. So having someone who has a relationship with the Trump administration is not necessarily a bad person to have on your board. In fact, could be very helpful. The second thing is, of course, streaming sports. The UFC, they've done incredible things viewership-wise with a number of different platforms. As Meta maybe tries to get more into that space, that could also be a very advantageous person to have advising on your board.
Well, we know streaming is a major thing here. So Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much for giving us that perspective. Have a great, great afternoon. That's two greats for Kelly O'Grady, and she's deserving of at least three. Hey, a developing health story for you. The first human death due to bird flu reported in the United States. So the death was in the state of Louisiana, where we have learned the patient was over the age of 65, did have an underlying health problem or problems, and got the virus from exposure to a backyard flock of birds. The CDC says the health to the general public is low, but we're watching this one closely. New research by the European Heart Journal says morning coffee drinkers reap more benefits than all-day coffee drinkers. Hopefully you've already had your sip. The study says people who drink coffee only in the morning are at lower risk from dying from heart disease than those who drink coffee throughout the entire day. And morning coffee drinkers are 31% less likely to die of heart disease than those who don't drink coffee at all. Stay with us. CBS News 24/7. We have reaction from President-elect Donald Trump to a judge's decision to block the release of a major report from special counsel Jack Smith. The moment in a wide-ranging news conference at Mar-a-Lago that seemed to even take the president-elect by surprise. We'll have that when we come back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. All right, in the last 90 minutes, you had quite an opportunity to hear from President-elect Donald Trump speaking there at the podium at Mar-a-Lago on a wide-ranging buffet of issues, as it were. So let's speak to CBS News political leader, the man who leads us here at CBS News, Fin Gomez. Fin, let's start with what the president-elect had to say about Panama and the Panama Canal. I thought there was some interesting discovery there.
No, absolutely, Reed. I think what it was very interesting, essentially what the president-elect said, not just about the Panama Canal zone, but also about acquiring Greenland, essentially saying that he would not rule out military or economic coercion to acquire those two strategic areas. Of course, Greenland being an autonomous territory under Denmark, and also the Panama Canal, of course, being given back to Panama some time ago. In fact, I thought it was interesting here as well, Reed, that he mentioned on a week, very significant week with Jimmy Carter and the funerals that are taking place this week, some of which the president-elect is attending. The President-elect Trump was very critical of Jimmy Carter's policy on the Panama Canal Zone, saying that he basically gave it away that he wants to acquire it back, essentially. But also he made news, Reed, when asked by our own Caitlin Huey Burns about whether he would pardon those January 6th defendants who were charged with violent crimes, if he would also pardon them. He said he was going to take a look at that. He would not rule it out, but to expect major pardons. And of course, Reed, he also discussed changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Well, and speaking to sort of that regional conversation, he also had some things to say about who he thinks should run for prime minister in Canada, saying that he would win like that. But then he said, but let's not be prime minister, let's be governor. Who did he say he'd like to see as the leader of our neighbor to the north?
Maybe not on the top of the list for many of our respective Canadian colleagues and their politicos, but Wayne Gretzky is who the president-elect suggested should run for either prime minister or governor. Of course, President-elect Trump talking about how he believes that Canada should become the 51st state there. So a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek remark there towards the former NHL Hall of Famer, who is friends with President-elect.
You know, and also I listened to much of what he had to say from Mar-a-Lago beginning in this newscast and then in breaks of this newscast, and really sort of take it in. This is also an incoming president who is not done grinding axes. He referred back to many things that he said were frustrations for him, upsets with him, and you kind of get a sense that he is going to have an eye to righting what he sees as wrongs that were committed against him.
Yeah, very much a set of grievances that we heard in the 70-minute speech with just 13 days until he's inaugurated. But he went after the current president, he went after President Biden and his sweeping block on offshore drilling. And saying that he's going to reverse it on day one, and he again reiterating that they're going to drill baby drills, one of his mantras from the campaign cycle, of course, but also going after Jack Smith, the special counsel, and really a lot of his critics, if you will, including Democrats, and really getting a sense for this. What would likely be the tenor of this incoming administration, Reed.
Well, and speaking to what President Joe Biden has done regarding those offshore drilling spaces, and they are very large tracts of land, thousands of acres, right? But in order to reverse this, the incoming president has got to have support from Congress. This is not just something that can be done on day one. Does this signal that the president-elect feels like he has really bulletproof support in our nation's House and Senate to get these things done on day one, like he's saying?
Well, he definitely believes that he does. And if you look at the imprint that he has on the Hill right now, they basically navigate towards the will of of the rudder that he is, on the boat that he is on. And frankly, he believes he has, that strength. But, if you look at the new House balance of power, there's not a lot of space there, not a lot of space for him to maneuver in some areas like this. So if there's even some detractors or some lack of cohesion there on the Republican front, it could be problematic for his intentions here, especially with this and what some Republican critics or some Republican operatives that I spoke to who align themselves closely with the incoming administration say when they look at what the Biden administration did with this offshore ban, essentially it really puts the incoming Trump administration in a corner to really utilize those areas, especially with tariffs coming into place and being implemented. This was an area that the Trump team believes that they could maneuver and get some essentially some financial revenue from to try to make up the difference when it comes to tariffs. But again, it really just shows, Reed, that this is going to be a very, very drastically different administration that will be coming in just less than 2 weeks compared to the current one.
Hey, stay with me, Finn, because we're going to deliver on a promise that this broadcast always
Sure.
does. When we see it, you see it. CBS News 24/7 bringing you breaking news. An appeals court judge has just refused to delay Donald Trump's planned Friday sentencing in his New York hush money case. This comes on a day when, in that wide-ranging news conference, the president-elect seemed to be very happy about a judge blocking the release of Jack Smith's report. Now this news, there will be no delay in the sentencing.
That's right, which is expected on, as you said, Friday. The president-elect is expected to attend that sentencing via virtually, which is an option that the judge gave him. But look, if you're looking at the previous if you're taking a tally of the previous legal cases and where they've pretty much gone to the way of Donald Trump, in favor of Trump, right? But this, of course, has not changed. He's holding it, the judge is, on Friday, and there will be, and the president-elect, with less than 2 weeks into his new term, will be sentenced.
Well, Finn, we know you were watching this news conference from Washington, D.C. We also had Caitlin Huey-Burns in the room where the news conference happened, but also watching from our nation's capital the Democrats who are readying themselves for President-elect Donald Trump to take the oath of office and begin a new term of leadership. Let's go ahead and listen in to what the Democrats had to say after the president-elect had these words from Mar-a-Lago.
Donald Trump is going to have a lot of press conferences. He's going to say a lot of things, and some of them are just going to continue to be crazy. We're not falling for this trap, and the one bill, two bill, it doesn't matter. What the American public need to know is that Donald Trump is working with House Republicans on efforts that will hurt them, on efforts that will have the potential to reduce Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, that will harm their ability to qualify for supplemental nutrition. They've talked about eliminating Head Start, the Department of Education. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And what they are talking about is they are huddling behind closed doors. They do not believe in transparency. They are trying to cut a deal, just like Speaker Johnson cut a deal to have his gavel. They are trying to cut a deal to hurt the American public. That's what this is about. And so they're going to have a lot of closed-door meetings. They're going to say a lot of things. But at the end of the day, that is their fundamental focus, is how they provide tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, and how they cut programs that hurt people. That's all they're trying to do.
So a counterpoint from Representative Pete Aguilar, Democrat of the state of California, there on CBS News 24/7. I want to ask you about this, Finn. You know, it was said in the days after the election that a lot of Democrats felt like perhaps the Trump administration has overplayed their hand. And it seems like we are seeing an emerging strategy by Democrats, hoping that perhaps the Trump administration cannot deliver on some of these campaign promises and really send that message strong into the midterms and elections ahead. Do you see that emerging strategy there?
I do, Reed, and that's a great flag. It's exactly what I've been hearing and speaking with some top Democrats here in Washington, D.C., that they do expect that part of their strategy is to sort of this wait and see approach, if you will. They have 2 weeks. They do believe the Republicans will end up imploding. There'll be likely some infighting down the road. But for the next 2 years, with the Republicans in power, it will be difficult for them to maneuver. Politically, they do feel that there will be a swinging back of the pendulum within the next 2 years. Obviously, it's a long ways to go until those 2026 midterms. However, they do feel that there is some hope, they say, for them to really come out of the wilderness and really start leading again and making gains politically. And again, their biggest strategy right now, Reed, is just to wait back and let it happen.
Finn Gomez, political director, with his fancy white band Apple Watch that no doubt during that news conference from Mar-a-Lago went off just like mine was. Ping, 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 ping. All right, whenever your watch goes off, so does mine, and we'll continue having this conversation on CBS News 24/7. You have a good day. Thank you so much, Finn. Well, millions of Americans in the grips of a winter blast that has now turned deadly because of ice and snow out on some pretty major roadways. Tragedy out there. 5 dead in Missouri and Kansas. Widespread power outages. Also, a major issue right now is the fact that 170,000 people across Missouri, Illinois, West Virginia, and Virginia are still without electricity. And that, in many cases, means they are also in the cold without heat. So let's go live to CBS News Philadelphia's Nikki Dementri. Nikki, you are in Cape May, New Jersey, about an hour southwest of Atlantic City. It looks frigid there, but also it looks like insult to injury, like the winds are kicking up a little bit as well.
Reed, the winds are stinging against your skin, and it's really cold here as well. So that wind chill is not helping. We're seeing gusts right now upwards of 20, 30 miles an hour. That's not helping cleanup efforts at all. Take a look at how much snow we got. About 8 inches, a little more or so in Cape May. It was the most in Cape May County. This area was in a winter storm warning yesterday. It was also in a state of emergency yesterday. Officials were saying, please stay off the roads if you can. Most people did for that part. That being said, come back over with me, John, if you don't mind. We're going to go over to the roads right now. You can see the sun's helping a little bit, but plow crews have been out throughout yesterday, throughout today as well. And now the concern as we head into another frigid night is this is all going to refreeze. So crews here are keeping a special eye to the roads, to the sidewalks to make sure everyone stays safe.
Nikki, you got into television thinking this was going to be a glamorous job, but this is a service profession, as our viewers know. And I'm glad you have those rubber galoshes to keep you safe. Be careful out there because, to your point, that water melting behind you, it does freeze. And we wish you and the people who are without electricity there and that in so many areas the very best. Yeah, pretty crazy. Nikki Dementri, thank you so much, as always. Now go get warm. Go get in your car. So let's talk to Jess right now, who's going to bring a meteorological perspective to this. She really raises a good point. During the day, people might think, I can get out on the roads because I can see the water moving.
Yeah.
But within an hour or 2 hours with the pickup of that wind, it freezes again.
Absolutely. And they're not done with these strong winds just yet. I mean, taking a look at today's storm, it's another interesting one because we're no longer under a winter storm warning. However, there's still winter storm advisories that are in effect right now, so we're going to dive into that currently. We take the map up real fast so I could show you off into the Midwest. That's where the storm swept throughout yesterday, off into the mid-Atlantic too, but there's still a whole bunch of purple on this map in areas like upstate New York dealing with winter weather advisories today. And to add to that, a lot of storms still lingering around with a lot of cold, dense air to follow. Yesterday's storm brought heavy amounts of rain, snow, and ice widespread throughout this region. And taking a look at today, this area of low pressure, it's still bringing just a little bit more moisture with it. Right behind me, what you're going to see is just this area of low pressure continuing to deliver strong winds throughout areas like Pennsylvania, up into upstate New York, and all throughout the mid-Atlantic into the afternoon hours today. As that continues to move out, we're not seeing as impressive numbers when it comes to that snowfall total like you just saw just a second ago on our screen. However, this is what we're diving into. An additional 2 to 5 inches of snow expected in areas like upstate New York as we head into our Wednesday and Thursday forecast, and then that'll start to taper off slowly on the back end of this week. Here's what it's looking like though for areas like West Virginia that got hit heavy yesterday. Close to around 4 inches still expected in areas like Webster Springs, about an additional 1 inch just near Charleston. Now over into areas like New Jersey, it's not going to be as bad compared to some of our friends up in upstate New York. Still expected to see an additional 5 inches of snow near Tupper Lake. That lake effect snow could cause a lot of issues too just along that shoreline. Back to you, Reed.
All right, thank you so much, Jess. Well, the man accused of burning a sleeping woman to death on a New York City subway train tells the judge he's not guilty. So prosecutors say 33-year-old Sebastian Zapeta lit the woman on fire and then fanned the flames while sitting down on a bench to watch her burn. A horrible act of cruelty is the accusation against him as he's being loaded into that police car. Prosecutors say he told police he was the man in the surveillance videos of the fire, but he also told them he drinks a lot of alcohol. Can't remember what happened. He is facing multiple counts of murder as well as a charge of arson. International headline now, Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of France's far-right National Front Party, has died at the age of 96. He was known for fiery rhetoric against immigration and multiculturalism. Le Pen was a member of the European Parliament until the age of 90. Our monitors now take us to a developing story out of Florida. Get this, 2 people found dead inside a JetBlue plane compartment. So let's go to CBS News' Morgan Reiner in Fort Lauderdale.
JetBlue confirmed for us that during one of their routine post-flight inspections, they did find 2 people in the landing gear compartment of one of their flights. Unfortunately, both of those people were dead. At this hour, we do not know their identities. We don't know how they got through security and into the landing gear to begin with. We do know that the flight came from JFK in New York, which is about a 3-hour flight time. JetBlue added that this is a heartbreaking situation, that they are committed to working closely with law enforcement to figure out exactly what happened here. You know, for hours overnight at Fort Lauderdale International Airport, passengers, people arriving here at the airport did see a medical examiner, a crime scene van, several Broward County Sheriff's Office deputies. You can see behind me now, operations are back to normal here at the airport. It's been very busy all morning long. Of course, we will let you know as soon as we get any more information about this deadly investigation. Back to you.
Morgan Reiner reporting from Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. All right, so the end of an era for a major U.S. business. Party City auctioning off all the leases of all of their 695 stores in the United States. This is, of course, ahead of the retail company's nationwide closure. They announced in December that they will close their doors for good after 40 years in the party business. They're attributing the closures to high inflation. However, 155 stores will remain throughout Canada, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden declaring 2 new national monuments in California today. We're talking about the Chuckwalla National Monument in the southern part of the state and the Satitla National Monument in the north. Both areas are sacred to Native American tribes. The designation protects the areas from fossil fuel drilling and mining. President Biden will deliver remarks this afternoon. And that is it for us at CBS News 24/7. When we see it, you see it. We see breaking news on these monitors. We will continue watching it throughout the day. We are also mindful of the fact that very soon the body of former President Jimmy Carter will arrive in our nation's capital for ceremonies that will then lead to him lying in state in the United States Capitol. Thanks for watching.